Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. If anyone can hear me in the chat, just push one. All right, we got confirmation. Thank you for the confirmation. Zoe Royalty, what's going on, fam? Stop by say for you. G Darius, what's going on? Black Scorpion, what's going on? Thanks for the confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 330, Pan-African Chat. Please hit the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible. Hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab that we've posted this week. If you want to join the panel, there'll be a link in the chat. Just raise your hand when you're in the waiting room so that we can advance you to the panel, or else you'll be waiting there for a long time. What's going on, Super Triz? All right, we got 10 people up in here. We can get it cracking, man. We'll get started with the first article. So for those of you who are new here, Pan-African Chat for us is basically us just doing an analysis on things in the news that are related to Pan-Africanism and how it relates to ADOS, American descendants of slaves, and those in the diaspora. And we'll do our analysis on it. So that's what we do here. Mega Montana, what's going on? Rainy Woman, good evening to you. Green Machine, what's going on, brother? All right, we'll get started with the first article. All right, this first one is from Forbes.com. Why is China building Africa? China is all over Africa these days, building railroads, bridges, and ports, doing what European colonialists should have done long time ago. Why? On the surface, the answer is that China is investing in Africa to place the continent on the global map, help African countries develop a sound infrastructure. That's what these countries need to sustain economic growth and join the global economy. Below the surface, the answer is different. China is invested in Africa to gain political and diplomatic influence, as has been the case in Southeast Asia. Even though they are financed with Chinese loans and built with Chinese contractors and labor, most of these projects are designed to lock African countries into a long-term political and diplomatic relationship with China rather than to make money, says Ted Bauman, is a senior research analyst and economist at Banyan Hill Publishing. China can use the diplomatic relationship, for instance, to gain Africa's votes on sensitive matters in the UN, like the Taiwan and South China Sea issues. But are these Chinese investments economically viable? These projects these projects can be economically viable for African countries, but it depends on whether the underlying assumptions behind them hold true, says Bauman. For example, China is funding and building a $3.6 billion railway upgrade between Nairobi and Mombasa in Kenya. In this case, performance has exceeded expectations in both passenger and freight volumes and will probably contribute significantly to Kenya's emergence as the premier economy in East Africa. Still, that may be the exception rather than the rule. The bulk of the Chinese investments are concentrated in Nigeria and Angola, are closely linked to their respective oil industries, and are coupled with commercial investment by Chinese corporations, continues Bauman. In these countries, Chinese project investment in the energy sector comprises a little less than 30% of the Chinese government total. But Chinese corporate investment in energy companies comprises 60% of the Chinese commercial total. What does it mean for the future of African energy companies? That suggests that China is using state-funded energy infrastructure projects to open the door to Chinese corporate domination of African energy companies, explains Bauman. That could prove to be disadvantageous for their African partners, especially if the Chinese government uses its project financing to leverage lower prices for exports of African oil to China. That may certainly benefit Beijing and the local elites that are in control of the energy sector in these countries. African energy exporting countries like Nigeria and Angola have a history of elite appropriation of the proceeds of oil exports, he adds. But there are exceptions to the rule. Again, like the Kenya Railway project, for example, which definitely serves a broader public market. In the end, it should be up to African countries to decide which projects Beijing will build in Africa and whose interests these projects will serve. So, not really a whole lot has been revealed in this sort of article. As usual, it's always non-African people that are very critical of Chinese investment in Africa and what the Africans are doing, what the Africans should be doing. So then we ask the question, why didn't the Europeans do that? Why didn't the Americans do it? They had no interest in seeing Africans even reach their potential of globalization, integrating them in the global market and the political infrastructure, because they wanted to see them be subservient to that of European Caucasian powers, and that's not conducive to in a pan-Africanist agenda. So with that being said, all these people who are critical don't seem to offer alternatives to what the Chinese have already made. They just say, well, this is a bad deal. Well, colonialism was a bad deal too, but you don't seem to have too much of a problem with that. What's going on, Soul Royalty?
Hey, what's going on, Mike? Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me, Mike? All right. So on this topic, yeah, I agree with you that you always see these think pieces and these articles written by like non-Africans talking about how what China is doing to Africa is negative. Meanwhile, colonialism was even a worse deal. But the reason why they keep pushing this narrative is because they fear what's going on, that China's continued development in Africa is going to lead to Africans being prosperous and independent away from the Eurocentric Western liberal order, and that's what they fear, because they want to keep Africa subservient so they can keep raping Africa for its resources. Uh, they can keep raping Africa with his best and brightest, so they can create a continual brain drain in Africa. So all this is fear, because they know they know that Africa is on its way being developed. So they're just trying to write these articles to undermine what China is doing. But the thing is, they had an opportunity to do so. They could have done this easily. It's not that hard to have a Marshall Plan for Africa. How come the Europeans and the United States have done it? Now they're paying attention to Africa, but it's too little, too late. They miss their opportunities, and it just goes to show how these Europeans think that, you know, anyone that does anything that's different from their way of exploitation is a negative. And it's kind of good, and it's good that the Africans are waking up. They're smarting up. Like, listen, we're entering from a multipolar world, from a unipolar world to a multipolar world that you don't have to deal with Europe or the United States. You can deal with China or Russia or India. So it's fear. It's fear that they're afraid what this development to Africa can mean for them, because Europe is on the decline.
Yeah, definitely, man. Definitely. For whatever reason, they seem to have this idea that, well, Africans should come up with with this sort of initiative and that sort of initiative. Well, how come you wasn't talking about that in the 1800s, the 1900s, in the early 2000s, on what Africans should be doing in terms of colonialism, right? They never really have a solution for that. They think that colonialism is a natural process when dealing with Africans, right? With melanated people, that you should be under the boot of white imperialists. You should be, right? And therefore, if you're under the boot of white imperialists, how is that beneficial to them? And if you say that, well, it's not beneficial, then what is your solution to actually being progressive, right? There's always this criticism of Russia, China, India, all these other countries that made investments into Africa, but never any criticism of what the Germans have done, what the French is actually doing, what the British have actually done. You still got African judges wearing these stupid European wigs. It's 2019, they're still wearing European wigs. What the F is up with that?
Yo, dead ass, bro. So sometimes I'll be seeing that shit like an Al Jazeera, like, yo, you niggas look ridiculous with those
Mhm.
wigs. They look ridiculous with those wigs. But it's and I think it's also the way Europeans do colonialism. I mean, Europe tries to portray itself as progressive and all this, but let's be real. The way Europeans have done colonialism, going way back to the ancient Romans, is through brute force. That's how they think. They think like you have to brutally subjugate this people
Mhm.
and take the resources. Like, they don't think on just development. Like, it's not in their mindset. I mean, you look at it when, I mean, I know it's kind of, it's not a good, example, but kind of when the United States went to Iraq. I mean, yeah, they went to Iraq to get rid of Saddam Hussein, but they just went and blew everything up and was like, I bet, all right, so you're gonna be subservient to U.S. foreign policy. It's like that's how Europeans think. They don't think on the same wavelength on how Russia or China or India is doing.
Mhm.
And you can understand like why China is doing this, because they understand colonialism. They've been under the boot heel colonialism with 100 years of I forgot, the 100 years of shame or something. Europeans haven't felt that. Europeans have not felt being under the boot heel of somebody else, because they've
Well,
always been on top.
well, to a certain extent, you can argue that the European Union and NATO are both colonialist agendas to keep Europeans under the boot of a political architecture and a security architecture, so that they they stay in their place. Poor Greeks, sitting in Greece with all this debt on top of their head. Meanwhile, Germany is living it up, lavish in their BMWs and their Mercedes.
Yeah, that's true. And same thing with Italy and Spain, like the
Right.
Mediterranean countries, to a
Mhm.
certain degree. That's why you have this resentment in Greece and Italy, to a lesser extent Spain, even though that's starting to be bubbling over. Um, there's this resentment towards Berlin, like how could you tell us what to do? You give us this bailout money, and you could say, all right, cut all your pensions, increase taxes
Mhm.
on the middle class. That's what. So to a certain degree, yeah, but I'm talking about like France, the UK and Germany, like those countries never really felt being under the boot heel of somebody else. France to a certain degree, to a lesser degree under Germany in World War II, and then Germany was kind of divided, so they kind of experienced it, but not long enough as Africans have. Like Africans were colonized for hundreds of years, literally hundreds and hundreds of years. So they don't understand. So to them, seeing you know China doing what it's doing is kind of foreign to them, because they're like, wait, you're supposed to be, brutalizing them. But it's also another thing too, is they're also butthurt that China beat them to beat them to the punch. Like, Europe and the United States was focused on the Middle East, while China was developing Africa, and also was developing parts of Latin America. So they kind of butthurt because they're like, fuck, we missed this opportunity. So it's a combination of being butthurt and fear that they missed this.
Hey, what's going on, DE Raptor?
Good evening, Mike, Zoe. How
That's
you guys doing?
What's
good,
up,
man.
D?
Good.
I'm pretty good. Uh, getting some people upset. I like to see these articles because it let me know that somebody somewhere is watching what Africa does, and they can't do anything about it. Well, they can, but no matter what they do about it or try to do about it, it's still not holding back the progress.
Mhm.
And as long as they can't hold back the progress, they have to complain. And it's going to get to a point. Right now, it's like African people everywhere are beginning to see
Mhm.
the benefits of what's happening. Before, they will look at it and question China, but they can see now that yes, Africa has got to play the hand that it's got, but it is also benefiting because while you see that they're sending out resources,
Mhm.
they are not getting 100% of the value of the resource, yes.
Mhm.
But what's happening is that in the background, you see Africans coming back home with their knowledge to help to build Africa. You see Africans in Africa, staying in Africa to build instead of going outside Africa. And these people are scratching their head. Why would an African want to stay in Africa? Why wouldn't he want to go to America? He can make a lot of money in that in America. You know what I'm saying? You can, but now Africans are beginning to say, you know what? I can't put up with the crap that you're gonna give to me. And a lot of if you can see on YouTube, just on YouTube, you see Africans. Every time you ask an African American or one that went to Europe,
Mhm.
why did you come back to Africa? I'm tired of the way they're treating me in Europe. I'm tired of the way they're treating me in America. It's not that I'm not making money, but I'm tired of what's happening to me.
Mhm.
And not only am I tired about what's happened to me, but I see the potential that I have to add to the society that I'm in, whether it be Ghana,
Mhm.
Tanzania, South Africa,
Mhm.
wherever they are,
Mhm.
they see themselves doing something to benefit Africa. And that's what I like about this. So they can write all the articles that they want. I'm happy.
Yeah, and the thing is that you're right about Africans going back, coming from UK and Canada and United States and going back to Africa, repatriating themselves. The stress of racism is enough to create battle fatigue, and that would, it's either fight or flight. And for a lot of people, man, with this tangerine tyrant in the White House, man, this might be the best time to actually get your stuff together and go back to the continent or go back to the Caribbean. This is the best time to do it. Africa, you want to be a part of the transformation, the infrastructure transformation and digital transformation of the continent, and actually place yourself right slap dead in the middle of it and be integrated into all the development. If you have that skill set, right? So a lot of IT people, a lot of Black men that I've met in IT have been Nigerian, have been from the continent, and they can transfer their skills right over there and not have a blip on the radar from a continuity perspective. So now's a good time for them to go back. Now's a good time to transfer your wealth. You make 150 grand here, 150 grand on the continent will have you living like a king in most places. As long as you manage your money right, a lot of positive can come out of this. And unfortunately, people don't want to talk about this because they just say, "Oh, well, why would you want to go to Africa? Because the Chinese are raping Africa." Are they really raping Africa though? I see railways being built. I see power stations going up. I see new Huawei smartphones, new high technology going into the continent. I mean, rape would be forced interaction that otherwise you would say no to. I see rape happening in the United States, but I don't see rape happening on the continent from that perspective. Although I'm not over there, I don't see the same thing. We see gentrification in ADOS. We see food deserts. We see political disenfranchisement. But yet that doesn't inspire you to leave. But you expect those people over there who are in control of their own countries that they should leave. Makes no sense to me.
I mean, and you're right, Mike. It's the right time to go to Africa. Matter of fact, my cousin from Canada, he married his girlfriend. She's Kenyan, and they're actually relocating with their two kids back to Kenya because I believe her father's some big Kenyan businessman. So he even said it. He was like, yo, he's like tired of all, like he has fatigue. Like he has like fatigue of how Black men are being treated in Canada and that sort of thing. And he wants to go back to Africa because we talk about this all the time. He sees an opportunity over there. So it's like, yeah, man, like we were just tired, man. It gets exhausting dealing with institutionalized racism, dealing with white supremacy, dealing with all this shit that's going on. It gets you drained because it's like, especially in this country, you make the point all the time, and it's true that nobody cares about Black men. Nobody cares. No one sees us as human. So it's like, what's the point in staying here dealing with this BS? And then when you have offspring, they're going to deal with it. And the trajectory of this country is going, I don't know, man. I don't think being here when these white boys get even more radicalized is a good thing. So.
Hey, Mike, let me take a
It,
1
it,
minute
I
here
think
to
that's
ask
good.
one question.
I'm sorry.
There's this guy called Shoma something. In other words, Africa can't do anything without China. I'm going to take you back a little bit to before China became a world power. When the U.S. sent President Nixon to China, nobody is saying China can't do anything without the U.S. Before the U.S. became a great power, it was England. Nobody is saying U.S. can't do anything without England. You guys better learn your history. seriously. Sit down with a history book and learn how power gets transferred, how nations rise and fall. You have a lot of history that you can study.
Hey, I just want to say, as far as the whole brain drain piece is concerned, Africa is concerned about that. They've actually, the president of Ghana was talking about how they wanted more of their people to get educated, come back to Ghana, and create jobs and a stronger infrastructure there. They certainly wanted foreign investment. People are asking for Africans, African, especially ADOS people, to go over there. I know a lot of people talk about the former slave game and all that. And yeah, Africans definitely have that, to contend with, but at the same time, there are opportunities. And they're looking, they're certainly looking for people to get over there. You got to know the groundwork. So you got to put your feet on the ground there, and really get a sense of how they do business. That's very important to understand that. That's another aspect about it. But there is a door open, and without question, that's something that we should be looking at. The Pan-African movement has helped us here in the United States with respect to civil rights and so forth. The Pan-Africanist movement has helped African countries get their freedom with a lot of support from from a lot of Americans and Afro-Americans here. So all this is related. I know that it's not related a lot of times in history, or we don't talk about it because there's an interest for those to keep some of that out, because as you are able to put more international pressure on situations, you can actually get a more favorable result. They certainly don't, they don't want to encourage that, but we should know about that. And we should consistently talk about that like we're talking about here. Very important that we understand that there's a very strong connection between us and the continent, and that there always have been, and it kind of always will be. So I just want to certainly speak on that. And I think there's some great articles that Mike's talking about. And Mike and I talked earlier today about other movements with respect to Afro-American student unions and so forth being very critical, and some of the other critical movements that are going on, not only in Africa, but in the Middle East and so forth, that we should be talking about, that are having a great effect. And I'll let Mike talk about that a little more later, but we should always keep this as a key focus on anything that we talk about with respect to Africans in the diaspora and Africans here in the United States.
Yeah, I just want to answer one of the questions in the chat from Mega Montana. Is it true the EAF are putting together their own currency like ECOWAS? Yes, they are. So there is, and I think it's already been accelerated past ECOWAS. So the EAF stands for East African Federation. What East African Federation has done is they've centralized a language, which is Swahili, and then number two, the currency is meant to stabilize the environment for import and export of goods. So what that's going to do is going to rapidly boost up the economy over there in probably in a matter of 8 quarters, which is relatively good, for them. It's already vibrant as it is over there, but it's going to make it even more enhanced, so to speak. It's kind of like having it's kind of like NYC, New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey as the tri-states. That's what they've basically formed, and you see how beneficial it is to the tri-states. Although New York eats the majority of the pie, Connecticut benefits greatly from having those who can't afford to live in NYC, hop across the border to Connecticut and go right back in, and those who couldn't, and when there's no real estate space available in the NYC, they go to New Jersey. So I might be wrong on that. Nagone could probably correct me on that.
Yeah, Mike, you're complete.
No.
New York City and the tri-state area. They
I live
integrated their
there.
tax plan. They
I just
integrated
want to
their
say.
taxes, the income tax. They integrated the income tax. Like if you live in Connecticut, you work in New York. Like the taxes that they collect in New York, they give it to Connecticut, and vice versa.
Well, you have to understand, your highways, your tolls and stuff like that, they're split. They're a part of it. They have a central economy here in the tri-state. I live here, and we travel between New York State travel between Connecticut, travel between Jersey, and yes, even Pennsylvania. So that all really, it's we're a central hub because we have the largest population, but people are definitely moving out to these areas, and the tax game is shared certainly through the through the travel system, because it feeds deeply into this system. And there's no question about the tri-state area is a 90-mile radius. And when you talk about a 90-mile radius tri-state area, 90 miles, that can reach down towards moving towards Philadelphia as well. So that's how big this thing is, and it's pretty serious business. So I live here. We deal with it all the time, and of course you have your Port Authority, which is New York, New Jersey, and certainly you have your New York, Connecticut pathways going up 95 and so forth, right straight through there.
90 West.
And 90 West actually takes you out into going into Massachusetts. In fact, it actually starts taking you up that way as well. So that all that plays a huge role that comes into this tri-state area. You are looking at a 90-mile radius. Yes, you are.
Yeah, and I think the Africans are learning from the Americans in that regard, man. The whole tri-state thing, man. The whole tri-state ecosystem is so. It's so valuable to their economy. They generate millions of dollars a day just from tolls.
I mean, the George Washington Bridge alone, that's the amount of, I think, millions of dollars a day from that bridge alone.
Yeah, it's a big ripoff. My gosh, it's like $16 going across. It's a major ripoff now. It's fucking crazy.
Fucking MTA.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big money making operation, and we saw some of the corruption that actually had come out of it, and how some people had to kind of answer for that as the time. But it's a big revenue generator. It's massive. You have so many people coming into this.
But you talk about that. You talk about that part of it, but the Port Authority's role in the airport system.
Certainly.
Nobody talk about how much money that generates. That generates even more money than the Port Authority. Certainly.
It plays usually because planes and everything else like that coming in. Certainly, there's no question about it. It's huge. It generates billions upon billions of dollars. It's no doubt.
Yeah. So to answer Mega Montana's question, man, I know he said thanks in the chat already. That's essentially what ECOWAS, EAF, that's what they're looking at doing. They want to replicate the same sort of eco infrastructure that the tri-state has done. New York, to their credit, has done impeccable things with the small amount of real estate that they have, and for the amount of population that they have, relative to the population that they have, since they've implemented that whole entire system. So that's something that a lot of African countries are learning from.
Yep.
All right, let me get to this next article. Actually, let me respond to this one in the chat. It says, Lino Codell, do you imagine the French will move to stop the ECO from being a viable currency? There's been discussions about the French going in and trying to disrupt that, but I think the French have a lot of problems in their own country. With a declining economy, you have the yellow vests out there protesting the cancellation of diesel vehicles by 2022, which is a ripoff because they told all of these people to go out and buy these diesel vehicles and how efficient they were, only to turn right back around and basically write off these vehicles by 2022, that they have to be off the road. I think that's a ripoff, and I think that their economy is sliding to the left in decline, and they have their own issues. They have been worried about China being in Africa and sort of these French colonial states, these francophone states, and causing disruption in terms of their economy. I think at some point, the French and the Chinese will bump heads militarily over Africa. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
For sure, because we tried to head it off at the pass with respect to invading Libya, with getting their gold-backed dollar lined up, and That was a big problem, and that was France knowing that this was their time was up there, and we we prolonged their time by going in and disrupting Libya. But now the Chinese and the Russians have moved into the area, and that's definitely going to greatly affect that. And I definitely see where that is going to be a conflict at some point in time. I certainly don't see France coming out ahead on this. I think France is actually, in some respects, on their way out. And I think these are some of their last gasps that they have going. But this is kind of how I'm seeing it. D, you see it any different?
Nope. As a matter of fact, let me add a little bit to what you just said.
Mhm.
China is now beginning to build in Africa. When I say build, Africa's young population are now growing up to be consumers, and Chinese are building factories in Africa. So when suppose you got a factory built in South Africa, and you got to cross borders, Zimbabwe, Congo, Kenya. Every time you got to cross the border, your goods going to get delayed, and you're going to have to pay taxes. So if all those nations in the EC, I mean Eastern Economic Community, were joined together, they had one common currency, one common border, like we were talking about with New York, Connecticut, and Jersey. The language and everything were standardized. Then China can ship whatever it wants in cross borders, whether it be China, Russia, anything that's built in Tanzania can go across to Kenya. No taxes. You understand? Can go to South Africa, no taxes. Go to Zimbabwe, no taxes. So you got a cross-border system that creates and promotes trade. And that's what the Chinese are there for. The Chinese are all about trade. They are building up the infrastructure because it's going to benefit them with trade. And what's happening in Africa is Africa going to gain from it, because now not only the Chinese going to build factories in Africa, but the Africans are beginning to build their own. They're not building like in Ghana. The Chinese are helping them build a car manufacturing business, the first one producing mass producing cars in Africa. When Ghana got to export its vehicles, it's got the whole from Ghana, Nigeria, up to Senegal, because it's one community.
Yeah,
so they're gonna
Kantanka,
benefit. Am I right?
Kantanka was
Am I
moving
right,
nicely with
Nagone?
that. Yeah, no, that's Kantanka cars you're talking about. And we saw it. I don't know if Mike played. I don't know if you're dead on it. DE Mike, I think played the. I don't know if Mike, did you play
Yeah,
the?
we had it on. We had a
Yeah,
we
yeah,
had a
yeah, yeah,
we
yeah,
had a
yeah,
thing
yeah,
on
yeah.
about those vehicles.
Yeah, the native born guys over there, John and his wife.
Yep.
They had that on their channel, showing that. I've been very aware. I knew this one guy, Memnon, who I am actually a Google friend with. We had those conversations deeply about what was going on in Ghana, and they were talking about the cars and the Prophet Safo and all his whole crew over there. Talking about creating this car company, and it was so interesting to see how the IMF and these guys didn't want to support that. The economic hitmen couldn't come in there and play their game, so they actually tried to didn't support this car company as it was taking off. And now you got the Chinese and others coming in who certainly want to play, and they're trying to create a car market. First of all, to sell to their people first, and then branch out from there, which is definitely going to grow. So yeah, the dead on the money, dead on it. That's exactly what's going on, and that's going to increase. And they're building new factories there that are going to be very cutting edge, if not bleeding edge, if you will. And this is what's happening. So the Europeans and these guys, they fucked up. Your United States fucked up. They came in there, not handling this thing right, and they've kind of, I think they've started to deal themselves out. And as over the next few years, over the next decade or so forth, we're going to see just how devastating that is. Is it going to come down to a conflict with respect to military? It just might, because they're going to be so far out of the game. The only way to deal themselves back in might have to be solely through that. I don't know, but I definitely think their goose is cooked. France and Francophone countries, they finish. And
Well, they're gonna have to put up a fight, because if their economy slides, they will end up just like the rest of the pigs, Portugal, and Italy, Greece, and Spain.
Yep.
And they could very well potentially, I mean, that's the worst case scenario, but they
Right.
could very well potentially end up with a Frexit, like Britain having their own Brexit, because they would not be able to sustain the European economy with a declining economy of their own. It could be very disastrous for that country. If they're having riots right now, it's going to be blood in the streets.
Okay, Mike, I want to ask you this. If they come with a Frexit, would that mean that they would now have to have a different type of relationship with the African countries that they would have to utilize to do their Frexit with, like Brexit's going to do? Wouldn't they have to form a different type of business relationship? They just couldn't come in there as conquerors and as how would I like to say, colonialists. This relationship would have to change. How would they go about doing that? I mean,
they would have to militarily occupy these people and force the heads of states to actually sign, these sort of documents, put their John Hancock on it and say, you sign your life away to us, and this is what it's going to be. African Union's not going to go for that.
I don't see the likelihood of that happening. Go ahead,
you just hit something that a lot of people don't think about. What happened is that the EC, the European Economic Community, always used to hand African leaders, whether you're from Gambia, which is the smallest, they would say, you know what? Here's this contract that you have to sign if you want to trade with the EU. But now, when the EU start falling apart, you're gonna have individual countries in the EU having to trade now with blocks of African countries. And the contract now is going to be in reverse. Because now African countries will say, look, you're sending all your goods in here, 80, 90% of it tax-free. Now we're going to tax all your stuff. Because now you got maybe 50 million people in Portugal trying to negotiate with Senegal, Gambia, Ghana, Nigeria, this whole group of nations. And not only that group of nations, but they got to negotiate now with the eastern nations of Africa, who will form their own group.
Yep.
You see what's happening here? As Europe falling apart, what's happening?
It was a critical mistake for us to go in. And I got it. This is on Obama's head to go in and fuck up Libya the way they did. That was a tremendous error. The fallout from this will be seen 25, 30 years down. This was a tremendous mistake.
Well, keep in mind that there weren't any American fighter jets involved in this, right? It was actually the French, the Italians, and the British that went in there and smashed it.
But that was initiated by us. We went in there. We went in there and said, do this, because what's his name before, Sarkozy, and then they were trying to get this done. There was a big problem when he was in there, and he was trying to get that done before it didn't happen.
Because they were trying to decide how they were going to split up Gaddafi's gold. That was the big argument. Yeah, Gaddafi had tons of gold that they wanted, and I think in the end they never even got it. It was the Qataris who came in with those C-17 jets, jumbo planes, and put them on forklifts and took them back to Qatar. Now, what happened to all that gold? Nobody really knows. I think Libya still has gold reserves in Britain and other places, but the gold that was inside Libya has been forklifted out by Qatar and other Arab League states.
But we had to go ahead for that. We had to go ahead. We went with the go ahead for that. If we didn't want that to happen, it wouldn't happen.
I blame more I blame more of the African countries for not stepping in. I blame them more. I don't really blame Obama for that, because you have to remember that they had every intention on taking down Gaddafi long before Obama came into office, during the Reagan administration.
That's why Gaddafi sat back and said he wasn't going to, he wasn't going to pursue nuclear or weapons and all that kind of stuff. He was trying to cut a deal with these guys. He knew that these people were trying to come in and invade him. He knew that, and I thought he made a tactical error by not pursuing his nuclear program.
Oh, but he also admitted to the Lockerbie bombing, right? The Lockerbie bombing was never proving to actually be Libyan. right?
Well, he never agreed. He never admitted to it, but he did compensate the people for it. But he never admitted to it. Say, we'll give you compensation, but we won't admit to that. But remember,
Right.
they had bombed Gaddafi's country. They had just missed him, killed his daughter, and everything else like that.
One
His
of his
adopted
daughters.
daughter previously, and just missed him. And that's when he retaliated with the Lockerbie, and that's when people said, terrorism, counterterrorism, we shouldn't be making moves like this. But that was a response to him being bombed. He never agreed or admitted to that we did that, but he did pay. He did make some remuneration, some financial remuneration. He did that. So.
Yep.
And one quick point too is like one of the consequences of destabilizing Libya is like the whole Sahel region in Africa has been destabilized. That's why you have Burkina Faso, all the countries in West Africa, even as far as Nigeria with the whole Boko Haram fuckery. All those weapons that were in Libya from all those militias are pumping over the Sahel. That's why Mali and all those other countries got destabilized, and France has troops over there. But the thing with the French is they don't have the resources to maintain that for long, because all they're doing over in the Sahel region is trying to keep those jihadist groups at bay, not to totally defeat them. I wouldn't be surprised if China just comes through to these countries and make it, listen, we can help you, secure the Sahel region, because these Frenchies are not doing nothing about it because
They're already there.
on the way out.
They're
Oh, they
already
have?
there. Yeah, they're already there under the United Nations. China has contributed more troops to the United Nations than any other country combined. But you also have to keep in mind that Chinese United Nations peacekeepers are actually taking the most casualties. I think they take about 500 a year. So we don't really know who's killing all these Chinese peacekeepers. It's been rumored that it could be the Europeans, it could be American intelligence on the ground going after Chinese peacekeepers, because China doesn't have any foreign military bases outside of China except for Djibouti. So the idea here is to put their soldiers in United Nations peacekeeping missions to get them exposure to other countries in terms of militarily, without occupying them from a Chinese nation state standpoint. So that's been the strategy, but they've also taken a lot of casualties. And with that being said, they may be prepping themselves for an actual global conflict. I know that they have a lot of troops and infrastructure developers over in Palestine, in the occupied territories as well. Every time Israel bombs it, it's the Chinese that goes in there and rebuilds it.
Yep, Mike, you're on target with that. The Chinese are actually giving their generals and their command staff kind of like experience, on the ground experience dealing with people in different areas of the world.
Yeah,
And
they
Africa
are.
is one of
You're hitting it right in the head there, D. Chinese are playing a very sophisticated game. United States know it, and that's why we keep talking about. And Mike, you gotta continue to talk to folks about that great documentary, The Coming War on China. People are not looking at that, and Pilger did a beautiful backdrop to that and breaking it down and showing you where America's really coming from in so many ways, and why China is a tremendous threat to the United States with respect to global hegemony in the game that the Chinese are really playing. Very sophisticated game. Not to say the Chinese in love with everyone, but they understand what America's about, and they know how to undermine this, and they're playing a very effective game right now. Very effective. The United States does not know how to deal with it.
Let me knock out this article real quick. This one is from quartz.com. These Chinese vloggers are changing how China's rising middle class sees Africa. Chinas looks a little teethy there. When Beijing-born producer Theo Mali relocated from Berlin to Johannesburg 3 years ago, she was enthusiastic about the move. It would be her first time in Africa. But as someone who enjoys immersing herself in different cultures, she was looking forward to the new experience. She fell in love with Johannesburg, a city that she felt had very little in common with most of what she had seen and heard in mainstream media. In 2018, she decided to work on a collaborative video project with a 10-person team from China. Eventually, only 2 members of the team traveled to Johannesburg, with the rest stating they had concerns regarding safety and disease in Africa. Molly says, I knew that China's mostly state-ran mainstream media offered a very simplistic, sometimes biased view of the continent, but I had not realized the extent to which it affected everyday people's opinions. It was then that she decided that she was going to share her experience on the continent to show the Africa most Chinese people do not get to see. So this is behind the paywall, but I think this is an interesting blurb, so to speak. Again, you have non-ADOS, non-Black Americans going over there and taking the dive for themselves and trying to immerse themselves in the culture, while we have people on the manosphere who want to sit up here and talk about the Africans hate us.
It's not only the manosphere; it's outside the manosphere as well. It's in Black YouTube, and you already know who some of what I say. And some of these women and some of these people are playing to 2,000, over 3,000 people in their chat rooms when they're live streaming, and they're saying Africans don't they don't like you. I mean, it's some of this is kind of unbelievable in what I'm hearing. It's kind of unbelievable to see that we are that parochial in our thinking, and we're not thinking 3-dimensionally at all in this. And I think that's part of our problem. That's going to be an issue. I was talking with O'Shea Duke Jackson. He comes here on the channel every now and again, and he's in the chat. But he said, yeah, you guys talk. You make a lot of good ideas. You guys are sounding great. But one of the things you guys have to do is you got to get your feet on the ground there. You got to get out there and walk the earth in that area and see what's going on and see how things work, and then really, really get a good understanding. He's dead right about that. It's something we have to do. But I think when you get out there, you start doing it, and the more of us come out there, I think the more the better it will be. But we got to get out there and see what's going on. Got to get there. I know Mike is dealing with African groups and so forth, and talking with them, and they want you out there with boots on the ground, investing in everything else like that. Now, everything's not going to be that easy as far as this. Ipso facto, it's done. But no, you got to make the connections and start to move around on that continent to make these moves. Others are doing it, so we can't say, well, it's going to be hard for us. Others are in there, they're coming in with money, and they're getting shit done. So,
in due time, man. I mean, you can't just get up on Thursday and get on the next flight. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, absolutely. But we do have to get boots on the ground. Very important. Others are doing business. It's not saying so much about what Mike is saying. It's just it's about what must be done, and others know it. Others understand this.
Exactly, and this whole ADOS versus African thing it's coming at the worst possible time, because
yes, I agree. Is this so?
At the worst possible time, because I mean, we read the article 2053. Black wealth will be zero. There was another article that came out. I don't know if you've seen it, Mike. You probably did, about how automation is going to devastate Black men in the coming decades. It's like this upcoming decade, we have to get our shit together, and everyone knows that the future is in Africa. Everyone knows the future is the continent. So many people are going there making businesses and all that. Everyone's going there. You have Asians, you have the Chinese already there. Then you have the Indians. You have even some of the Arabs going down there doing business. Like we should.
Russians are in there. Russians are rolling up in there.
So it's like this whole anti-African sentiment you see in some African American circles it's coming at the worst possible time, because we're not thinking the long run. You have live streams of dudes talking bad about Africans. Like, these guys are still butthurt that 15 years ago, like, an African taxi driver drove past him in Manhattan when he wanted to go to Brooklyn. It's like, you have to get over that. We're in the best opportunity right now to do business over there, and this is just, I don't know, it's worst possible time to go.
Correct, Zoe. You're dead on it. They're dead on it, man. We got to be thinking bigger than this. It's tough, it's tough. A lot of people are all sensitive and nah, man. You got to going forward here. You got to put your big boy freaking drawers on step up to the plate and handle this, because that's where we are with this. Others are in there. Others are there. It's not like, and they're not going anywhere. They're not leaving.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say, get to the next article real quick. All right, this one's from quartz.com. These are the African countries not signed to China's Belt and Road Project. It's a pretty interesting backdrop there. Looks like some Butterlay stuff is going to be going up in the next couple of years.
Oh, for sure.
China's Belt and Road Initiative is a vast transcontinental development project looking to improve connectivity among nations in Asia, Europe, and Africa. First announced by President Xi Jinping in 2013. Dozens of countries have signed on to the scheme, seeking to complement their infrastructural gaps, increase foreign investment, expand trade, and ultimately reduce poverty. These include 40 out of Africa's 55 states, who, along with the African Union, have signed memoranda of understanding with Beijing to finance and build modern highways, airports, and railways. Yet 6 years since the BRI's introduction, 14 African states are yet to jump on the bandwagon, raising queries about the profiles of these states and why they are holding out against Beijing's assertive push into Africa. Geographically, these countries are spread across 4 regions in the continent. In the east, Eritrea and Mauritius, center, DR Congo, Central African Republic, west, Benin, Equatorial Guinea, and south, Eswatini and Botswana. All countries in North Africa are part of the Belt and Road Economic Corridor. So this is behind the paywall again. The problem is they don't always see the benefit, because if you take Botswana just as an example, these are in the middle of the continent itself, so they don't even have access to warm water ports. They're kind of geographically locked in. So for them, it wouldn't always make that much sense for them to sign on to a deal if they don't have a port to actually take advantage of. Although they're slap dead in the middle, everything that comes that you want to, if you want to get to the interior of the continent, you have to go through them. But they can build their own infrastructure. They don't really need the Chinese to come in there and build it for them. And that may be the contention that they're running into.
I mean, yeah, the Belt Road Initiative. I mean, it's been shown to done great benefits for the countries that China is developing, and that's why you see, the U.S. and the U.K. and a lot of the European countries are just trying to do little destabilization here, a little destabilization here to try to halt, the expansion of Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, remember a couple of years ago, like in Pakistan or something, there was like a few Chinese contractors got killed, and I mean, it's obviously the West is trying to derail it, but China's like full steam ahead. So I hope more African countries join the Belt Road Initiative, because this is the best chance for development, and I hope like more even Latin American, Caribbean countries get into Belt Road Initiative. Like I was talking to my father about it, that because Nagone mentioned this too about like in Brazil, because Brazil was part of the BRICS, and then this Bolsonaro dude came out of nowhere. I feel like it's just like what Nagone said, like the CIA put him there to kind of derail Belt and Road Initiative, because Brazil's such a
Belt
big
and Road or BRICS.
Mm-hmm.
He was on the CIA payroll, man. See,
He is on the CIA payroll, but he's not going to dismantle the BRICS. He's not going to remove Brazil from the BRICS. That's just not going to happen. They're too integrated into the Chinese ecosystem in the Russian political foreign policy system to actually leave. They can't just up and leave. That's just not, it's not going to happen. They can slow it down by you know, delaying signing contracts and agreements, but they're not going to remove them from the whole entire system. That would be even for him, that would be suicide, right? There are oligarchs within Brazil that say otherwise, that you're going to do what you're told. I don't care who put you in power. You're going to do as we tell you to do.
Yeah, and always remember, I know Brazil very well, and that is one corrupt fucking place.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everything is for sale up in there. So it's coming down to the money, and wherever who's going to play the biggest game is where they're going to go. But we still have a lot to say there. It's unfortunate, but we do. Unfortunately, we do.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me get to this next one from quartz.com. Africa's tourism industry is now the second fastest growing in the world.
Wow.
Some 67 million tourists visited Africa in 2018, representing a rise of 7% from a year earlier. Africa, the second fastest growing region when it comes to tourism after Asia Pacific. African countries are now reaping the benefits from positive policy changes coupled with increased investments in the sector that have made it more attractive destination for tourists. In Ethiopia, for example, relaxing visa restrictions while improving flight connectivity has seen Addis transform into a regional transport hub, even overtaking Dubai as the world's gateway to Africa. This has resulted in Ethiopia becoming Africa's fastest growing travel country, growing by 48.6% in 2018, according to Jumia. So things are popping over there in terms of tourism, but I rarely see any cheap flights to the continent from the United States. DE, you have anything you want to add to that?
There's a reason for that, bro.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. The you have to keep your people. You can get a trip down to Jamaica for a weekend for $100. You know what I'm saying? But getting across to the continent, which you can do overnight, just like if you're going to fly down to Brazil. You know, there's a reason for that, and you can see it in New York. If you go to Kennedy Airport, if you go to Washington Airport, how many African airlines have landing rights in these locations? Now you'll see that they all go to London, France, Spain, you know, but none to US. And there's a restriction, there's a deliberate restriction on that. You don't see American Airlines flying to Africa. The company I used to work for, we started flying to Ghana, and they had plans to open other areas in Africa, and suddenly they did a U-turn. And first I couldn't understand why, but then as I began to read and see what's going on in the political system, then I understand why. Because we had the capacity to fly everywhere in Africa. We had the capacity. We had the aircraft that could make it. And I was an engineer. I went to Ghana and Nigeria. And our airplanes, we used to one-way ticket out of Nigeria, $6,000. And that flight was full every night. One-way ticket out of Ghana, same price. And the flight was full every night. One night I met this Ghanaian guy, and we were standing there talking. He came in and bought a ticket. When this brother opened his briefcase, There was nothing in the briefcase but money, U.S. dollars. He was going to Washington. There's a deliberate here in America to keep African airlines out and keep U.S. airlines from flying to Africa.
Yeah, so I wonder how can that be? So how can we fix that? I mean, tickets to Africa are just so expensive,
Yeah,
and that's one of the major things that's preventing ADOS people from going. Because I've talked to a few of my friends, and like, yeah, they like to go to Africa, but they're like, it's expensive, the flight tickets there and all that stuff. So it's like what DE says, it's like there's a deliberate, effort to kind of depress, people from going to Africa from the United States and over there. So
you can look. When my company sent me to Africa, I got off the airplane, and when I walk into the airport in Ghana, the first person that spoke to me says, "Welcome home." Just look at me. He just looked at me. It's like, how do you know I'm not Ghanaian? He said, "Welcome home." If you're gonna get that kind of respect when you walk off an airplane, nobody know me. If you're gonna get that kind of respect when you walk off the airplane in Africa, the U.S. knows that. The British knows that. You can get you could have Thompson is out of service now, but you could have get a flight out round trip flight out of London for £300 going down to Africa, Senegal, Gambia, Ghana, Nigeria. £300. Can't get it out of the U.S.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't say welcome home, Bajan boy.
Yeah, well, I met one of us in Gambia.
Yeah.
Walking. But anyway, that's the way it is. The U.S. has had a deliberate plan, policy to keep Black Americans, the average Black American. You get Jesse Jackson will go to Africa, and you got these people going in the name
Steve
of the
Harvey.
in the name of the government, because they know they're not a threat. But when you get the average American going there, coming back and tell their family, I had this great time. It's almost like when you go to Jamaica and come back, go down to Ochi, come back, says, man, we going next week. Come on, girl. That's the way it would be if the flights to Africa were available and people went to Africa. People will come back and say, look, I got a place. I got this friend. We are going next week. We are going back. We are going. Our next vacation is going. They don't want that.
Well, you want quality transportation as well. You don't want a Spirit Airlines going to Ghana, from Atlanta. That would be a disaster.
No. There are rules. No. The Ghanaians have a rule. The Ghanaians have a rule.
You can fly to Ghana for $1,300.
Hold on a minute. The Ghanaians and Nigeria has the same rule. Any flight from the U.S. has to have twin aisle airplanes. They have to have a level of a certain level of service that you cannot. Spirit Airlines cannot fly to Africa unless somebody rented the airplane and flew people there. It's not allowed by the rules of the Ghanaian government.
I'm going to start checking tickets again because last one I was looking at them before it was about $900. So that's about what it is. If Ghana Dan was here, he could really get more into it. But it's about $900 under a G, depending on what time of the year you can fly around to get there. So you can get out there. You can get there. You certainly can.
But one of the other things that we need, that Africa needs, is Mike was just talking about Ethiopian Airlines. But Africa also, Kenyan Airlines is now starting to grow. Tanzania Airlines is now starting to grow. The West Coast, except for Nigerian Airlines, don't really have a big presence. They have a few airplanes, and they fly probably one. I think they have one flight a day at JFK.
Mhm.
But they need to grow the airlines the way that Ethiopian Airlines is growing their airline. And it can't be the case where the government or somebody in the government runs the airline into the ground
Mhm.
because they are not running the airline sustainably. And that's what happened in place in Nigeria. Nigeria has the capacity to have one of the best airlines in the world, but you can see up to about this is the first month that I haven't heard of some airplane being hijacked or almost hijacked on the runway in Nigeria.
Yep.
And that's the kind of problem you have. And if East Africa, West Africa, sorry, can develop that kind of airline system, then you be getting cheaper flights because they will be flying not only to New York, but they'll be flying to Washington, Atlanta, Chicago with the newest airplane. Because the 777, the older 67300, the 787, those airplanes will make that route with 300 people
Mhm.
and be profitable. I'm serious. That airline will be profitable if they can get it into the United States.
Yeah. Let me get to this next article. This one is from Quartz again. African languages are the fastest growing in the United States. Somali youth playing basketball in Minneapolis. What a surprise. Newly released data from the U.S. Census Bureau spotlights African languages among the top 10 fastest growing languages spoken at home in the U.S. The list featured 3 groups of African languages: Swahili and other Central Eastern Southern African languages, Yoruba, Twi, Igbo, and other West African languages, and Amharic and Somali. Analysts credit the development to recent immigration trends. Although African immigrants make up a small share of the nation's immigrant population, the overall numbers have doubled every decade since 1970. According to the Pew Research Center, Africans now make up 39% of the total foreign-born Black population, up from 24% in 2000. So we see the numbers from 2016 to 2018. Swahili is the fastest growing language spoken at home. And then you have other African languages, such as Bengali and Tamil, Yoruba, Igbo, all half of what almost half of what the percentage of Swahili is being spoken at home. So
I mean, that's very interesting. Because I would think that we would have increased West African immigration, but it appears like there's a lot of East Africans coming towards the United States. Because I know, like in New York, we mostly have like West African immigrants for the most part. It's very rare to see Ethiopians or Somalis. So I guess the Somalis, well, I guess probably in the DMV area, you'll see mostly Ethiopians and Somalis, uh, and just like what you said, like there's Somalis in Minneapolis. But that's interesting. I wonder what's behind this trend of increasing
how,
African
well, how
immigrants.
about the United States bombing their countries? I would probably attribute that to it. You have no place to go after a Hellfire missile drops on top of your house.
Though that's true.
Okay, one thing
Increasing
about this is
stability.
that you see the Africans on the whole. When a Somali comes to U.S., he's going to the parents. If the parents come, they are going to make sure that their children get the highest level of education possible.
Mhm.
The U.S. government is looking at this. The people who you're going to see, especially in brothers mentioned Minneapolis, are all young people, younger generation. You go to Washington D.C. I mean, you walk through the airport, and you see people who are young people, not the older generation, the younger people. All these people they bring in, the US government has brought in, like he said, as a result of the war, after these people ended up in refugee camps, they took them out of the camps and brought them to the US. And now they are the creators because they're going to get the education. They're going to say, you know what? In order for me to succeed in the US, I have to be educated. And they're going after the education. And their children are going to be educated too, because they're going to make sure the children get educated. And the US government wants that.
And you know what's interesting with the education part? I'll make this quick point. I was having a debate with a friend of mine because he was trying to say like, oh, the reason why immigrants are successful and they come here because they have capital back home, but you know, that's not the case. Like these are refugees. Like they don't have capital back home. That's the reason why they do better than the ADOS people over here. It's more of a culture thing of they put education first. They push the kids to get into college, into degrees that are in demand. Like they don't just send the kids to college and just say, all right, do whatever you want. So yeah, I mean, these people, it disproves my point that these people come here with nothing. I mean, my parents came here with basically nothing, and they made something of it. So it's not like these immigrants. You hear a lot of this ADOS talking point, like, oh, these Africans, the only reason why they're successful is because they have a home country where they can send money to. That sends money from that country to over here, so they're already set. That's not the case.
No, that's a fact. They know the fastest entry point to the middle class and upper class here in this country is through education. They see that. They see that very clearly. It's not a question. It's not a question to them. So they know when they come here, very rarely do you see Africans who come here to this country. You can say how, Africans, they're not all that smart over there in Africa. Fair enough. The ones who come over here, those are going to be the ones who are going to go to school and get their master's degrees and everything else like that. You don't hear about them not going to school. That's exactly what they do. And quite frankly, which people don't want to say, but Africans who are the immigrants coming here, are the most successful immigrants coming here to this country, and are doing as well, if not better, than the Asians and everyone else who comes here. They are of the most successful and some of the most academically advantaged people who are really killing it in the schools. You don't hear about that because they're black people, but that's exactly what is going on. So they are pushing it. They are coming here with a very typical immigrant mindset. And they are pushing it very hard, and they're very successful. That are coming here and they're doing it through education, and that's the game. I always said education is where it's at, but they see that the quickest move to middle class coming from a foreign country here is to get educated, and that has been in so many ways the experience for so many other groups, your Asians and your Middle Easterns and others. That's what they're doing, and the Africans are not doing anything differently than that, and they're doing quite well at it.
All right, this one is from course.com again. South Africans prefer their children to be taught in English. English is only one of the 11 official languages spoken in South Africa. It's currently the preferred language of education. It is used in many of the nation's schools, but children entering the education system are not native English speakers, and many are still in the process of learning English by the time they arrived at school. The main language of instruction in education influences academic and career progress. Oral language proficiency is a foundational skill that's required to develop the ability to read, which in turn is required together with writing for all types of learning. Language use in schools has been a focus in both national and international research. It is largely agreed that learners should be taught in their home native language. However, many countries continue to promote English instruction, including Kenya, India, and South Africa. The conflict between what is being implemented in schools and what is recommended by the available research remains unresolved. So the main reason why any country would teach their kids, their students and their faculty English is because your banking system is in English. That's usually how it goes. Whoever controls the banking and finance is usually the one who determines the language. At some point, people are going to have to learn how to speak Mandarin.
Pretty much. I mean, English is it's basically the language of commerce. It's kind of like how Arabic, well, how the Arabic language spread.
Mhm.
Like there's some Arabic words in some, West African countries and, some East African countries because of trade. Like it's always been like that since the beginning of time. Like if you're going to do business, you got to speak the language of, the person that's dominating that economy.
You're
And
dominated.
Hmm?
You're dominated.
yeah, pretty much, like black men are dominated.
Oh man.
No, but it's like yeah, for real, like you have to speak the language of the economy if you want to do business. So I mean, that's been the way since the beginning of time with history.
You got to have some form of literacy in another language. But I don't blame them because I understand the infrastructure, the academic infrastructure in those countries are usually a generation behind the West. So it makes sense that they would have these sort of linguistic issues going forward because there's so many other languages on the continent to learn from different tribes and different regions, different dialects. Um, that they have to that you have to interpret and understand. I always think it's interesting that Americans can barely speak English, but yet other people come to this country, man, they can speak multiple languages and dialects without even blinking an eye. It's just almost normal to them.
Yep. If I can, I encourage my son, my youngest son. He was being taught Chinese. If I can encourage Black people in America, throughout the world, to learn a language besides English, it'd be Chinese and Russian.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and Chinese is, to learn to speak it, I think it takes a little longer, but that is it's difficult to learn that easily because writing it is going to take a long time. My understanding, it's about 2,000 hours of study to really get Chinese down. 2,000 hours.
Yeah, I think it's 2,900 hours.
Well, that's what I got, between 2,000, 3,000, yep, depending on the competency of a person. But other languages, maybe other like European languages and so forth, it's a little easier. So yeah, Chinese, it's that's a work. I have a knack for language, so I would learn it quickly, but not. I wouldn't learn it in 300 hours. Let's just put like something might take me longer, like Spanish and Portuguese and these kind of languages. You can learn it pretty decently and get a very excellent handle on it with 300 hours of study. But Chinese, and that is a bit more difficult. So, and Russian as well, because Russian is fairly easy to learn, I think, to speak some of it, but learning its alphabet and so forth is a little different. Takes a little longer as well. Not as long as it would be Chinese, but it would take a little bit longer. So, yeah, those are some challenges. And knowing Americans ain't fucking with it like that. Pardon my expression. Ain't fucking with it like that. Definitely not. Definitely not. We have an aversion to this kind of thing.
And the
Mr. Russon Lejean, why Chinese are Russian? Can you tell him, Lagon?
Say that again.
There's a guy in the chat says white Chinese and Russians are not French or Portuguese. French as a language. If you see what's happening in Africa,
Yep.
not only in Africa but throughout the world, French as a language is dying because it doesn't have the prominency as English, you know. And as Africa rises, its pride, the pride of its people, gonna make it look for a indigenous language instead of holding on to the language of the oppressor.
Yeah.
Whether you in East Africa, you're gonna learn, I don't know, maybe the language of Ghana or Nigeria or whatever the case might be. In West Africa, in East Africa, is going to be Swahili. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like English in England. England before they used to speak Greek in England because Greek was the church language. But as the English begin to see themselves as being world leaders, not only did they say, you know what, the hell with Greek and Roman and Latin, sorry, we are going to teach everybody English and the whole world has to learn English. And as you can see, the Chinese are beginning to make themselves a force on the world economy. Guess what's going to happen when a person from China comes to your country? You can't speak Chinese. They don't want to talk to you.
Well,
Yeah.
They're going to talk to the guy who speaks Chinese. The same thing with the Russians. As the Russians grow in Africa, you can see the Russians going into Africa. You're going to have to deal with the Russians the same way as you deal with any other trading nation.
yeah, and the thing is, I don't know any banks that do business in Swahili. You know, just to be quite honest with you, no knock on the languages from the continent. It's just a matter of your banking is really done in English in this country, and
Yep.
in other countries, you know, it's their native tongue. We have not reached that level of globalization for the continent where they have major banking structures that actually are tied in with global markets that allow us to actually speak that language at that bank.
Yeah, that's coming, I'm sure, in the future, but that's certainly not the case on the ground right now. And I do think, in many respects, that English is going to be more of the universal language. I just think that is going to be how things are going to be, and that's not just from American hegemony. I think that hegemony is going to slide out, but I think, as far as where the economic capitals are and how things have been done, I think it's a little easier to do that in English for now. But I do believe that will change over the coming decades and in the next century. I think that is definitely going to change. But that's, I think, where we are now, and I think people are kind of accepting of it, but that will change.
And the crazy thing is, Americans don't want to learn another language.
Nope.
There's apps out here that can help you. I mean, I don't know how good these apps are. Are they any benefit? I mean, Michael, I would ask you this: do you think learning a language through an app would be proficient, or you think just going to a class?
We did a whole entire live stream on this months ago.
Going to a class and sitting down and having interaction with a professor is the best way of, in my view, doing it. You can learn from apps and you can get some stuff there. You can learn online, but really sitting down and getting the language right with a professor is the way to do it. I know Spanish, but when I learned Portuguese, I had to sit down with a professor. I didn't learn it off an app. I sat down with Wilson Lauria, this teaching school, 2 days a week, 1 hour each session, hour and a half each session, and sat down as he drilled me, threw stuff at me left, right, and center, talked fast, and dropped all kind of stuff for me that I couldn't barely listen to. After a period of time, you started to pick up the ear. Mm-hmm. That's how the game is played, if you really want to play it. That's why if you really want to learn a language, you go to another country, you learn a language, you got to be in that country for a while, sit there, you got to speak with the native people. Mm-hmm. That's how that's done. It's always been that's done. I don't think there's any other way to really do it much better than that. You can pick up some proficiency, but to get fluent, you got to immerse yourself, and you have to have a teacher sitting in front of you throwing it at you so you can pick it up.
Yeah, Creole is really hard to learn. Haitian Creole is really, really difficult to learn. There's so many bends. It's so three-dimensional in its tongue. It's not like French. It's not like French at all. Because a lot of words you can't find in a
lot of words are African based. A lot of those words are African based.
Very much so.
A little bit of French thrown in.
Yeah, I
very
remember.
much so.
Yeah,
it's just like in Mozambique, where you have where they speak Portuguese,
African,
but yet they have an African language called Ranga, and that's and Ranga is where the it's flavored with Portuguese. They have Você and all that in there. But there's a beautiful song by Wazimbo. If you guys would pick it up and listen to, beautiful song that they has that is some of the most beautiful music that's ever come out of Africa by this artist Wazimbo, who sings in Ranga, and it is just gorgeous, just absolutely gorgeous stuff. But yeah, when you listen to it, it's like if you're a Portuguese speaker, you can pick up some of it, but then you're like, oh, well, what's he saying? It's an African dialect, and that's what's spoken in Mozambique, and that's what they speak, man. That's but formalized language Portuguese, but Ranga is what they speak.
Yeah, I'm with Creole because I remember when I was in college and I was taking a French class and I was saying some words in Creole. Like my French teacher, she was like a native French, like she was from France. She had no clue what I was saying. Like she picked up a few words here and there. Like Creole is a very complex language, and the Creole language just now didn't like. For example, my parents, when they were growing up, they did not. You did not learn how to write Creole. Like they can speak it, but they can't read it. Because back in those days, if you spoke French, it was kind of like a status thing. So it wasn't until the 1990s that the Haitian government said that, all right, we got to teach Creole. I teach Haitians how to write and read Creole, because we can't just be teaching French because it's getting so much confusion. So yeah, it's relatively new that Haitians are learning how to write and read Creole. They knew how to speak it, but they had no formal way of just like reading and writing it. Like my mom, she's starting to understand how to read Creole, but my dad, he can't read that shit at all. Like
it's funny. My workout partner, he's Haitian and he speaks Creole, and I pick up a lot of it because it's so much of it is since this has a Romance language base, it's easy to hear a lot of the stuff, and I hear him talking about "Je passe," and he's talking like that, and I'm like, oh, what's happening here, and then there's so many other things that they say that I can pick up. So there is a large amount of French to it, but then there are the Creole words that are African based that seem to be very similar throughout all of the Caribbean islands, like Jamaican. If you're in Magra and Maga and all these words, they seem to be, consistent throughout the islands, which shows you kind of our, how we all got there the same way, if you will, even though the languages are a little bit different. But I picked up a lot, and it's very interesting. Of course, I love languages, but that's true. Speaking Creole and speaking French, they're very different, similar but very different at the same time.
Man, Mike, these prices are cheap. I mean, compared to like prices I knew of Africa, like about 5-6 years ago, these prices are relatively inexpensive.
Is there a difference coming from Kennedy or LaGuardia?
I don't know. I can't see the thing real clear, but Cheapo Air is one of the cheapest. They're not actually airline. They're like travel agent.
Yeah.
And they collect. They put together flights based on prices. They may put you on one airline going from here to Europe, and then another airline going from Europe to Africa. And then when you return, you're flying two completely different airlines. While if you fly, say, Lufthansa from here to Germany and then down to Africa, it's going to cost you almost twice as much.
Yeah. So you can get to Ghana for $900, man. You can get to Ghana $900. You can get to a lot of places in Africa, 900, $1,100. Yeah. You can certainly do it.
Ethiopian Airlines, $781 That's a very good price for a
that's
flight to
highly
Africa,
butter
man.
laid. That's a highly butter laid price, bro.
Yep.
That's butter laid. That's butter laid.
Serious.
That's highly butter laid. So like I said, you can get around. I was pricing last year. Yeah, you can get around. Tickets are not that bad. They actually are not that bad. I mean, going to Brazil now, it's in line with that. Going to Brazil, so it's in line.
Exactly.
It's in line. The price is right, man. Price is right, man. I'm gonna have to get ready and seriously get off the duff and get out there because that's a move.
That's the kind of money we spend going to the nightclub. I mean, shoot. If
Right.
you stay home, I don't know, once a month, and put that money away, you can come up with that.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. It's not a money issue. A lot of people say, "Oh, you ain't got the money. People ain't got the money." You got a job. You get out there. Fuck.
Oh yeah.
You can get out there if you want to save. But a lot of people tell you, "Don't save your little nickels and dimes. Stay here and stay landlocked in the United States and get slapped up by these savages up in the air." Get out of here.
The Africans don't like you, Nagon. Don't you know that?
Oh, they don't like me. Oh, isn't that terrible? Oh, I shouldn't go anywhere. Let me stay here and deal with women online telling me fuck you when I buy them something. Oh my gosh, I need to stay here and take this leather from these fucking animals. Oh Lord, I gotta stay here. I gotta deal with them.
No, wait for your reparations, Nagon. It's coming.
Reparations?
Cut the check.
No, my
Hashtag cut
reparations.
the
Again,
check.
I don't need anybody to help me with reparations. I want to stay here. They don't like me. They don't like me over there. I gotta stay here. I'm afraid I can't go anywhere.
Brother Gabe, I never lost a bag. Brother Gabe, I've never lost a bag, and I was going there from 2009, 2008. Never lost a bag, bro.
Yeah.
3-4 bags going there and never lost one.
Man, I don't travel too many bags. If I lose one, I'll just buy another. Shit. As far as I'm concerned, I'm traveling. You guys want to sit here and landlock and deal with these sucker lades? Go ahead. I think it's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy our mindset. We got to get out of it.
I mean, Nagon. I mean, in New York alone, you have niggas who never left their own borough. Like they just stay in their, like, to them traveling is like a foreign thing. Like you have niggas in Brooklyn who probably never been to Queens. Like
you have people who never been out their counties, man. No question about it. No question about it. So you are dead on it, and that's the parochial mindset we have. You have people who've never left the state.
Yeah.
People who think, you've gone into another country is going to the Bahamas. That's a long ways out for people.
Hey, Ben, I can't wait to get to the Poconos.
You know how many people I know who've never been to the West Coast, who've never taken a flight out and flown cross country, never been to California, never been on a plane, never flown across the country. Forget about leaving out the joint.
Yeah, and it's just like DE said, is like, we can, like, niggas can just spend money. We could save money. We could save money, going to these places in Africa. Just don't go out. I mean, to these clubs. I mean, I've been out there. I mean, going to the club is like you pay a cover charge, and then you pay for expensive ass drinks. You buy expensive ass, fucking designer clothes. Like, if you just did some savings, you can have enough money to travel to the continent.
Man, I heard one brother say, "Yeah, well, save your money. Pinch, you pinching your dollars to go travel. No, yeah, save your money and just travel a lot." And they were kind of goofing. This is somebody who has a channel and someone who's supposed to be worldly and was breaking on you about trying to travel somewhere. I mean, the mindset we have is terrifying.
Yeah, I mean,
they go. My son just went on temporary duty to England, and he called me back in shock. He said, "Dad, I didn't know England was this expensive."
Yeah. Yeah.
In shock. But these people would rather go to England and France and Germany, than go to,
They're gonna go to comedy. I've been all through there. I mean, I haven't seen anything wrong. My son was in Germany before. I went over there. He liked it. And all. But like I said, it's good to travel to these places. But okay, fine. Look at that. But go elsewhere too. Go over to the continent. I was only in the continent once, so I can't sit down and say I've traveled it a lot. I haven't. But when I was there, it was it was highly butter laid. And because what I heard and then what I saw were two different things. And I think that's a big part for a lot of us. And I think travel is very important. It's not only fun, but there's a lot to learn. And there is a business component. So we talk about that here all the time. and that's something that we should consistently talk about because we do have to break some of that mindset. It is a mindset. Paul Bryant comes here talking about the mindset, and he's right. It's the mindset of how we of how we think that's problematic. It's our mindset.
Yeah, I mean, 3 different countries we just looked up: Ghana, Kenya, and Botswana, and all of them have the same, relatively same cost to get for round trip from Kennedy. So let me throw another one in there, man.
Though there are certain times of the year also when the prices do get a little bit lower.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Like you're saying, you're showing the price here like $2,300 round trip ticket the other day, and sometimes that $2,300 ticket will cost you $1,600.
Yeah. What do you use to book your flights?
I go to Cheapo Air, right? I'm serious. I go to Cheapo Air.
Same here.
I go to Cheapo Air and look at the price of their ticket, and then I will go to another airline and look at a direct flight on that airline. And if it costs me $100, $200 more, then I book the direct flight because I don't want to sit in London or Brussels for 4 or 5 hours. See, that's the problem when you get Cheapo Air. You always gotta sit somewhere. Sometimes you have to fly from Frankfurt to Brussels or Frankfurt to London. When you're coming back. When you're coming back from Africa, you gotta go through Brussels. You might have to go to Spain. You gotta go to Portugal and then go to Brussels. It just to get that ticket, just to get that price.
I'm laughing at O'Shea. I'm laughing at O'Shea in the chat.
Yeah.
You got it. He's over there.
Oh my goodness. O'Shea want to keep tricking out to himself. I mean, bro, come on. You gotta,
well, O'Shea is always welcome to come on the panel because I'd like to know how he booked his flights, man.
Well, he's come from Poland, so it's a little different.
He's gonna get cheap flights all the time.
Yeah,
bro. Poland, he go to Poland to Brussels and down to Africa, or Poland to Frankfurt down to Africa.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, he's gonna get cheap flights all the time.
So O'Shea's living it up.
So he can afford to.
He's gonna put a no-fly zone for us.
We coming at you. We coming at the Uganda fam. Because he showed me some pictures of some of these Uganda honeys, and it was ridiculous. So I'm sorry.
Hopefully I'll be there in December. So O'Shea, I'll be seeing you in December.
O'Shea's gonna pull up on you.
O'Shea said he's gonna pull up on you guys.
Probably pulling up his shorts. Pulling up his capris.
That's my brother, man, funny. O'Shea, Hotep.
You
I have you niggas missing. Come on, bro. You gotta share. You gotta share the spoils, man. Come on.
Send O'Shea to the wall. Send him to the wall.
Send him to the wall. You gotta send him to the wall, man. Send him to the wall, man. Send
him to the wall.
Get out of here, man. Send him to the wall, man.
Yeah. Nigga, don't orange me.
Don't orange me. Oh my God. O'Shea here tricking. He tricking it here. O'Shea tricking.
So what are some of the factors, like how do you take traveler's checks? Do you have a special credit card you take with you, a global card, Visa, MasterCard?
Always. Nicole can tell you this. I always use my Fidelity card. Fidelity pays me back. Whatever some bank charges me anywhere in the world, Fidelity puts it back in my account.
Yeah.
Always take 2 cards though.
Wow.
Have your Fidelity card and a backup card. and take some cash with you.
Yeah, it's a good one to have, but I still say Amex. I ain't gonna tell you Sonic Travel. Oh boy, it's hard. That bad boy hard.
I always take
It's hard.
take $1,000 in cash, maybe
Mhm.
1,500, because if you gotta buy, if you wake
Always
up one
have
morning,
cash.
you gotta get out of the country, and you can't use your card, you walk to
Always.
the airline and buy a ticket cash.
Always.
You said
Always
1,500?
have always.
1,500? Okay.
About 1,500.
I would say I travel $1,200 cash when you mean 1,200.
Is that
1,200 you
total?
straight
Is that
anyway.
total? Or is that just in for the emergency? Right? Is
That's
that
an
is that
emergency. I have
okay.
that in my pocket
That's
all
emergency.
the time. I don't use that at all. I have that in my pocket all the time.
1,200.
Don't use it under any circumstances. Anytime I want some money, I go to the bank, put my card, my Fidelity card in the machine,
Mhm,
and get enough money for about 4 or 5 days.
mhm.
Yeah. You're right. No. You know, this is Road Dog right here. He Road Dog talking.
Mhm.
Road Dog talking. Talking real deal.
Well, it looks like
Facts.
Uganda is looking pretty good right now. I mean,
You gotta get O'Shea upset.
Man, don't
You
get upset.
You be telling the
O'Shea
brother to
gonna have
look
some
for
of y'all
you.
missing out there. You tricking too hard, man. He don't want no competition, man. He gonna get
no,
off.
no, I'm saying relative to the rest of the flights compared, I haven't seen anything that's like, oh my God, I can't do this. You know, it's $2,000, $3,000. Everything has been under $1,000.
Yep.
Yeah.
And look at it. Uganda is next door to Ethiopia. So if you can't get a flight into Uganda, you just go to Ethiopia, and it's like a couple hours, 3 hours, 4 hours back. Same
Is that a
thing with
charter? Is that a
Tanzania.
charter flight?
Right.
Is that a charter
Tanzania,
flight or a drive?
it's the same flight. You go to Ethiopian Airlines, and it's like you transfer maybe 2-3 hours later, and then you go from Ethiopia to Uganda. Same thing going to Tanzania. Now Tanzania is beginning to run. They're buying new airplanes.
Mhm,
Kenya Airlines buying new airplanes.
mhm.
Rwanda Airlines buying new airplanes. They all fly to one another's country. They're all in the same community right now. They're the ones who formed the East African community. New airlines, new airplanes. They're trading it's almost like a trading block they're formed.
Yeah. Let me see if anybody's in the waiting room. No, we're good. What do you carry in luggage wise? Are you carry two pieces of big luggage, or are you just doing one single carry on?
Unless unless you can live in jeans,
Mhm.
then you're gonna have to have a second piece of luggage.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because if you're gonna go out partying, go out dinner with people, there's some places you can't go in jeans or shouldn't go in jeans. Africans are still a little bit formal, you know.
Mhm.
Like me, I have carry on, and I have one bag. Unless
Mhm.
I'm taking somebody, I have one bag and a carry on.
Mhm.
And with airlines that are trying to build their reputation, say like I'm saying, Uganda Airways, Tanzania Airways, Kenya Airways, Ethiopian Airlines, they're gonna take good care.
Mhm.
O'Shea said Qatar is a close second.
I think he's talking about flight attendants.
License. Oh, okay. Well, one of the things that you're gonna find is that they begin to hire a lot of African flight attendants.
Yeah.
Qatar is hiring a lot of African flight attendants. There are a few other airlines too that are hiring African flight attendants. What's that? Morocco,
Mhm.
for instance, going into West Africa,
Mhm.
they're starting to hire African flight attendants. And these flight attendants are all young flight attendants. I mean,
Well, they can pay him cheap money too, right? So
yep.
So
And they're friendly
DE,
too. They're not like American or United or Continental or whatever flight attendants at all. You know, they are very friendly people.
Mhm.
yeah. So DE, so what do you see? Like African travel, the industry in Africa going in like 10, 15 years. You see more
Oh
growth
man,
happening?
if look, you can always get some fool that's gonna destroy the country. You know what I'm saying? But if they keep on going like the way they're going now, if you look at
Mhm.
the East African community, where they're joining hands across borders instead of fighting one another. If you can, when this it starts in the, like West African community where you got Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, and all these a few of the small nations there on the west side of Africa that form the
Mhm.
community. When that community gets built up, then you have the east side and South Africa that are now forming another community. And when they get strong enough, they're going to add other people and build right across Central, North Africa, and down south.
Mhm.
The biggest problem I see now is like Central Africa, Central West Africa, and Congo, because Congo is so destroyed now that it's going to hard to get the criminals out of there. That's the only way I can put it.
Mhm.
You know, when you settled into something like when you got the mafia in the area, you can't take out one guy. You're gonna have to come in and take out everybody, and that's going to be very hard to do because Africa in itself don't have an army capable of taking out the people who are entrenched in that area.
Mhm.
That you got Cameroon. The French wouldn't give up Cameroon. They'd rather destroy the country.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? And all because of what? The minerals. Niger, uh, Cote d'Ivoire.
Mhm.
These are all mineral rich countries.
Mhm.
You don't hear about it, but they're mineral rich. And
Mhm.
people who got their hands inside, they don't want to give it up.
Mhm.
And not only the French, the French and the British are got their favorite people, favorite nation, America's favorite buddy in um, their private army.
Yeah. I'm looking at this Johannesburg, and it's the cheapest that's been posted so far, man. I'm surprised because people make it seem like, oh, you got to spend $10,000 just to get around there, and you got to, talk to this shady person in the back alley. It's like, no, looking at this, man, looks like it's pretty doable for a lot of ADOS people, man, who haven't really gone yet. I would,
And that,
I saw flights to Miami that were almost equivalent this week. So,
yeah, that Joburg flight also stops in, I believe, Togo. Is it Togo? Yeah, I think it stops in Togo because of fuel.
mhm,
Um, and you can fly Joburg. You can fly from Washington Joburg or New York Joburg. Get off in Togo, and then you got Togo, Benin, Ghana. Those countries right around the area.
mhm. Hey, O'Shea, if you're listening in the chat, which site do you use to book flights when you were in the United States in order to get to the continent? If you have done so in the past, and you're welcome to get on the panel as well if you don't want to type.
Yeah, these flights are relatively cheap. Damn, I
Yeah,
guess
you can look, like I said, look at Cheapo Air.
I mean,
There's a
yeah,
couple of other there's a couple of other schedulers that you can look at also. Sky Scanner.
Well,
Um, that's the newest one that I've seen on the market. But Sky Scanner is pretty good. You can look at, like I said, look at Cheapo Air, Sky Scanner, see what the prices they offer, and then go to, especially if your flight is like 3 months away. if you want to go in, say, December or January, go tonight, look at Cheapo Air, and then go look at South African Airways, Kenyan Airways,
Mhm.
Nigerian Airlines, or Moroccan Airlines. And if their flights have like, $200 or so difference, you pay the $200 and you go direct instead of stopping in Europe for 4 or 5 hours.
Mhm.
But out of the U.S., the flights are the most difficult.
You know,
TAP, you got to stop in Portugal. Spaniard, you got to stop in Spain.
but
You know,
but the thing is, and this is from a technological standpoint, is that they look at the browser that you're using, right? Is one of the tactics. They look at the browser that you're using, and they determine if it's Safari on the iPhone, then they charge you more. If it's Chrome on an Android, then they charge you less because they assume if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you're more willing to spend money, right? Because those are expensive devices. So those are little tactics that they use to pitch prices at you from these sites.
the other one is that they look at your computer. If I go to Cheapo Air and I don't buy a ticket from them the first time, when I go back the second time and look at the same flight, it might show that it's fully booked and the price went up.
Hmm.
So I have to erase my history.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah, yeah. It works off of time consensus. So if you didn't react in a certain amount of time, it's going to reset those prices on you.
Right.
I never knew that. That actually, if you if you use
yeah.
the Safari, that they'll charge you more if you have like a MacBook or
Yeah,
or
you can
compared
afford
to.
you can afford an Apple product, a half-eaten fruit. Why can't you afford this expensive flight?
Yep. They have all kind of people feel that we talk about this intelligence that they're using on the computer at least 2 or 3 times a week.
Hmm.
Intelligent learning. These computers are beginning to do some things that people not paying attention to, and this is one of them. Airlines use these tricks. I mean, you might go online right now,
Hmm.
maybe 10 or 11 o'clock where you live. If you live on the East Coast, 10 o'clock in the evening,
Hmm.
and they might put up a fare of $600.
Hmm.
Tomorrow morning, that same flight will cost $1,000.
It's crazy.
Yep. They changed the thing at night to say, well, you know what? Our next month's flight is only half full.
Hmm.
This is October 10th, this is October 9th, 8th, whatever the case might be.
Hmm.
November 1st, the flight's only half full. So we want to get up, get some seats filled because our airplane's got 300 seats. So they try to get another 25 seats sold overnight
Hmm.
because they're gonna get the money from you, but you're not gonna use the flight for another, 2-3 weeks.
Yep.
That money is in their pocket. They can do what they want with it, invest it, do whatever they want with it. So they're making money off that money that you paid them.
We got O'Shea on the panel. What's going on, my brother? Hotep.
So they can afford to drop down the ticket for 10 people. Suppose 10 people come online at the same time trying to get that $600 ticket. The first two might get it, and then the next two might have to pay $650, and then the next two after that might have to pay $675. You see what I'm saying? That's how this thing works. The computer's always looking at how many people are looking at that flight to determine how much they're going to charge who's there.
And they can see how many people are actually looking at the site as well, based on the browser header. Hey, what's going on, O'Shea?
Hey, what's going on, man? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, brother. You have any input that you can
Hotep,
give?
Hotep fam, Hotep.
I know you niggas better stay out of Uganda, though. That's what I do, though.
Come on, O'Shea, man. We support you, bro.
Pulling
Come
up on
on.
you, nigga.
You can support the other 53 countries in Africa, nigga. Support them. No.
That's funny.
Yeah. I just came off my ghetto ass live stream. I seen you guys talking about the continent, so I just wanted to come on and so somebody going to Africa for the first time or something. Or?
No, I think what we're trying to do is actually we've been talking about this for probably about since the turn of the year that we were going to do a business trip to the continent. I met with some brothers who came from the continent who were like diplomats and whatnot, and they were talking about doing business and that they wanted to that many of your MPs and heads of states would rather do business with ADOS black men rather than to do business with the Southeast Asian countries because of many levels of corruption. And that what they found was that a lot of brothers in the states don't have themselves together because they don't have the United States government backing them either. So you're going up against these sort of big briefcases, grease and palms and whatnot, millions of dollars. How do you integrate ADOS or American blacks into the projects that are going on the continent, infrastructure projects?
It's very difficult.
Yeah, it is.
It's almost impossible, to be honest, because I mean, I'm not no insider or whatever. I'm just a nigga that just been over there a few times. Like I'm there, like I've been to Africa. Like I was there for 2 months out of this year. But I will tell you that China, I mean, because you didn't think about Nigeria. A lot of guys used to be able to get rich in Nigeria in the Lagos area just for getting, bids from the government to do construction projects. Everybody knows that's how a lot of the elites stay rich. What's happened now is China can do the same project and can do it much cheaper than anybody else. I mean, civil wars have been fought in Ivory Coast over that same fact. So, if you want to come to Africa and do something like that, then the Chinese is even outbidding people that have firms in the country. Like even Ugandan firms are getting beat by the Chinese.
Right.
The Kenyan firms are getting beat by the Chinese. So that's a problem, man. Like a lot of African Americans, I really don't know how we can compete in infrastructure projects on the continent like that because, like you said, how many of us, you might have people that have the skill set, but China can come in and do the whole thing top to bottom with the manufacturing. We might have people who work in manufacturing, but we don't run manufacturing plants like the Chinese. And so the things that African Americans can do, this is just me, and I just speculate.
What you're saying is correct, though. What you're saying, I also see the same thing. What you're saying is correct.
Yeah. So the things that African Americans can do, from what I can see, that most people that do, they can get involved in the tourism, they can get involved in the service industry, which is, most African countries are highly, agricultural based. There's not many countries outside of South Africa that has like a multifaceted service level economy. So when you go to South Africa, you kind of feel like you're in the European Union or something like that, or you're in London, depending on what part you are. But most countries in South Africa, Uganda or and Kenya for the most part too, and maybe Ghana, but most of the other countries are not as diversified. So you ever watch this lady on YouTube? Her name is Dr. Hannah or Dr. What's her name? She's like her African business coach.
Dr. Harnett.
Harnett, yes.
Yeah.
She was talking about Dodoma, Tanzania, and Dodoma, Tanzania is the business capital of. It's not Dar es Salaam. I was in Dar es Salaam last year, but
Dodoma is the new capital.
Yeah, the new capital. So they're moving all their stuff from Dar es Salaam to Dodoma, and so now they have a big need for all these surgeons, which I already knew. Hotels. You're talking about people in the service industry, and people know this about Africa. The service is shit, right? And people don't understand that service industries, people from the West who go there, there's a big opportunity to fix the service industry. That's something that African Americans can get right away with customer service or running restaurants or owning hotels or owning Airbnbs or doing things like that. And then also entertainment is something. I mean, obviously, there are a lot of other things that we can do. Trying to build stuff to compete with the Chinese, I don't think that's a good idea. And then Africa is one of those places too, man. Unfortunately, you have to be there. I don't mean to be too long with it, but I'll tell you how I just got fucked over pretty good. I partnered with the Advice show with my Kinganda show, and what we do now is real estate videography. And if you look at some of the advice shows, all the real estate properties that we do, that's actually Ken Ghana that does that. When I got there, I met a really good real estate agent. He had some really high-end properties. He took us to the tour. When I got back, we set a deal to do 20 properties. And then when I got back, he changed the format of how we were doing it. And that would have never happened if I was not there. So the thing about Africa, it's not a place to fuck around, man. You have to be there. And if you don't, you're in real big trouble. You know, so that's just one of the, if you can't manage the project, if you can't be there, then it's not worth your time, man. Because you will lose big.
Yeah, the people I spoken to earlier this year, they said that they set up restaurants and stuff like that, and they came back after a few months and saw the whole place was cleaned out, all the equipment gone, you know, everything that wasn't nailed down was basically taken off the floor, including the tiles. So you're right in what you're saying. I've heard before. So, but what was presented to me was that basically, many African governments have many projects on the ground, including micro projects, right? So street furniture, things of that nature that need to be implemented, or that can be implemented, small scale projects that, you know, African Americans could actually get involved in, such as solar panels, wind turbines, things of that nature. $1 million, multi-billion dollar projects on the table from the people I've spoken to at this event. It's still on the table, but they need human resources, human capital. And me being a cybersecurity person, you know, they brought me into this as well and said, hey, you know, we can use your skill set over here. Let me know what you're trying to do. I said, let me talk to my guys over here. So that's how that conversation went. And they've been back to the continent 29 times in the last 2 years. So they're frequently back and forth to the continent over in Cape Verde, as well as Nigeria and a few other West African places, including Kenya.
Well, let me ask you this then, and what's, if they're saying that you're interested, like what is it that they need from I guess you or whoever else? Like, do you have to? Are you going to be competent if you move there? Like, what is it that you need to do to get to for example, or other African Americans to get involved in this, whatever they're talking about?
So you would need, they're saying that you would have to bring at least $1 million. So you're talking like, let's say 100 Black men bring at least 10 grand a piece, right? 10 to 20 grand a piece, to be involved in the project. And some of these projects, you know, such as laying down fiber optic cable, wind turbines, so renewable energy projects that are going on over there. That's a sort of skinny that I was told. And these are guys who have already laid down projects on the continent. So it's not like they're kind of trying to run a game on you. They actually have already done some of their projects over there. And so they had this event trying to gather more human capital, and met a few brothers who were from Nigeria who were nuclear engineers, worked at nuclear power plants and knew how to knew the system inside and out. So a lot of small scale projects that they're going to be working on from a renewable energy standpoint, fiber optic cable, Wi-Fi throughout some of the villages, just a litany of things that are anything that could be lifted by your hands, it would be considered a project and can actually be implemented. And that's something that the government is actually opening up to guys in the West, so to speak.
What do you guys on the panel think about that?
Well, look, you can't compete with the Chinese when you're gonna. We can never. We in America, Black people in America can't compete with the Chinese to build a railway system. You can't compete with the Chinese to build a port. You know what I'm saying? You can't compete with the Chinese when you're gonna lay, I don't know, 50 miles of highway. You know, so those are not the projects that you should get into. What you should get into is like if you're gonna put power in a village or 2 or 3 villages. If you're gonna bring a transportation system to bring people, say, from the village to Lagos or from the village to downtown Gambia, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
If you got the ability to do stuff like that,
Mhm.
then you can compete. You can make
Mhm.
money. But like O'Shea is saying, you have to be on the ground there.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what these discussions have led to, is that at some point we're gonna have to, take a trip over there. I already plan on taking my trip to Rwanda to Afrotech, in March. So that's
Okay.
yeah. So I'm going to be going over there for that. There's a couple of other conferences, tech conferences that's happening on the continent as well that I want to attend. Be a part of that, because I met quite a few brothers, man, who were very from the continent, that were very skilled, man, in code development. They were writing code on the fly, like it was nothing. So I think there's a lot of opportunity over here, but it's just a matter, like you said, of getting over there on the ground, and doing some FaceTime and some handshakes.
Yeah, I'll say this.
Mhm.
So I've been to, let's see, I've been to Africa, well, not 29 times in the last 2 years. That's a lot. Maybe been like 8 or 9. But for me, I always look at, one country. I would say, like, there's a lot of guys go to, start traveling, start going to multiple countries, and I mean, that's fine.
Mhm.
But going to one country and then revisiting that same country that you're gonna just, you're gonna do. Now, Rwanda is probably one of the most transparent countries. It's probably not the best one. They don't have a lot of natural resources, unfortunately, like, let's say Uganda, Nigeria, whatever. But you also start to look at what is the natural, because what you want to gain here ultimately is, how can I get residence in this country? What can I do to get a residency status in this country? For example, if you're looking at Ghana, Ghana is like, okay, if you want residency or citizenship or whatever, you need like a minimum of $500,000 individual investment. Now, I don't know what this, like, a group investment would be, but I know, like, Uganda and Kenya, it's a $100,000 investment. So I eventually want to gain residency and possibly citizenship in Uganda. So I'm looking at, like, that's the minimum that I need. So I would think every country has an investment department for each individual, and then that's the biggest part, is how can I get residency eventually in this country. And then you want to look at also, if you're doing business online, where can you get fiber optic, Wi-Fi at, stuff like that.
Mhm.
It only works in certain parts of the country.
Hey,
Little things like that.
O'Shea.
Yeah. Go.
O'Shea, I just want to ask a question. Isn't Ghana, aren't they offering citizenship to Afro Americans if you invest or do something there in the country? Is you just open-ended question? I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah, I've heard something about it, to be honest. I think that the year return is for anybody from the diaspora, but I don't know if that involves. I think that you get a citizenship, there must be some investment in the country, like you must have lived there for 7 years, something like that. Or if you want to even get like a business license in Ghana or something like that, it's $500,000 if you're by yourself. The only way I think you can avoid that is import export. But I believe that you need 7 years to be on the list. I think Brother Daniel Simmons might be a person that's a little bit more better than me. But again, any West African country for the most part is going to be more expensive than Uganda, Kenya. South Africa is 5 million rand, which is about $350,000. So, like I said, if you're gonna go to any country in Africa, you're gonna have to go and know this. You're gonna get fucked up. Just put that on your list, okay? I am going to get fucked up. That's the truth. You can't get around it. A lot of times in Africa, I can tell you this is a guy that produced 130 Kinganda episodes in Kampala and spent over $25,000 this year in Africa. Maybe 10,000 of that I couldn't. It's extremely hard to do business. People are can be extremely shady. And a lot of times, 65% of 100% promise is a win in Africa, okay? 65% to get you fired in America of doing a 100% job. But on the continent, it's a success. If you can get 65 to 70% of what a person says they're gonna do, you actually don't even fire that person. You're actually glad to have them. And it sounds crazy, but it's all about making little gains. And this is something a lot of people don't know, how cruel, how shady, and how serious Africa. It's really a dog eat dog world, and you have to know that. You know, where there's opportunity, yes, it's opportunity, but there's a lot of opportunity because it's hard to do stuff there. It's hard for a reason. So you got to have that attitude that this is difficult, because you don't want to go over there and be like, damn, I can't believe I. No, you're going to get fucked over. Just get that in your mind. It's going to happen. It's going to happen royally, and you have to accept it. That's the part. And when you get fucked over, that's kind of like that's when business starts on the continent, is when you take an L, because you're going to take one. There's no getting around it.
There's no such thing as like an African version of Angie's List, like Mfufu's list.
No, you're gonna it's that you're gonna get fucked over list. That's what's gonna happen. And if you can't accept that, then the continent's not gonna be for you. Like one of the billionaires says, the continent has to be in your blood. You know, because there are a lot of smart people, and to be honest, a lot of people have good ideas. There are very people who are thinking the same things that you think of, and everybody else thinks of. It's all about execution. And a lot of times, paying more to get things done faster, bribing people, doing stuff. Unfortunately, that's what works on the continent to get things done. And you have to be a person that is willing to do a lot of that to get what you need to get. And if you can't do that, then you're fantasizing about it. The continent's tough. It's not easy.
It's not the Wild Wild West that America. Go ahead.
What'd you say?
It's the Wild Wild West that America was in from 1850 to 1915. That's the way America was. And if you can get that in your head, then you understand how it is in Africa.
You have to have that mindset, man. That's just what it is. If you don't have that mindset, then a lot of people think like, oh man, I'm an American, like I'm an African American. I have skills. I got this figured out. Then you get to Africa and then you figure out that you don't know how things work there. You don't know how they do things there. You don't know the culture there. It's completely different. Dysfunctional shit is what goes on in Africa. Okay, that's what they do. So you're dealing with people who don't understand that they're even fucking up. This is the culture a lot of times. So you're talking business and talking things to people that's not as coherent as it is in the United States. We live in the United States where the country is about being on time. It's about being productive. It's about getting the most and maximizing everything. That's not how that works in Uganda or Kenya. It's just like that.
That's good. That's good information.
I had a transportation system, and I had like 6 buses in Gambia, and my drivers, for say every $5,000 that they gave me, I knew they took 2. Let's put it. Let's everybody know about dollars, so I'm going to use dollars. Suppose they made $5,000 for the day. They gave me 500. If they made 7,000 for the day, they gave me 5,000.
Oh shit!
You understand?
Yeah.
And I have to make sure that 5,000 cover my expenses, because I bought the vehicles. I did all of that. So if that's not covering my expenses and making me money to live, I say, you know what? Give me my bus back. In some places in countries you gotta look for what the government is backing. Sometimes the government will back you. They will suppose the government wants eggs. What they will do is they will send you to school and let you learn how to grow chickens. They will put you in touch with people who will provide you with chicken feed. They will provide you with the land. They will send you somebody and say, hey, go there, there's land for sale there. They will help you get it built. And then all you gotta do is just send the eggs to the supermarket, because the government want to provide more eggs. Understand? So that's the kind of the thing that you got to look at in Africa. You can't just go and say, hey, I like doing this, and then you go start doing it, because there's always somebody there, like O'Shea said, they're going to take your money. And they have no compunction of saying, hey, they're going to feel sorry for you.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. And I just want to say this. I saw Gabe. He says, I don't have time for any L's. Still, being in Africa is much more upside than, I'm not gonna say than in America, but obviously you have a lot more leeway, a lot of customization of things you can bring to the market. But again, it's about just connecting with people that you can trust. It's about meeting people. It's about being patient and like I said, dealing with in Africa, you have to be patient. Like I said, things happen that should not happen. Like if you watch the Native Born channel, he talks about he left his suitcase in the taxi cab, and the guy he called the taxi driver and said, "Hey, can you bring my suitcase back?" And the guy was trying to actually steal it and not return back with a suitcase. And then the neighbor of his knew the police sergeant, and the police sergeant called the guy. And the guy brought it back, and he had to pay the guy like $20 to bring it back. He's like, "Wait, what?" Like, imagine that happening in America. You have to pay somebody to bring something back that they left in your thing. But he couldn't. But that's how it works on the continent. It's just this is what you have to do. And like I said, Africa is only serious for people who are going to be there. If you're not going to be there, then you're going to waste your time. I'll say to anybody is going to be there, you're going to get fucked over, and you got to roll with the punches, and eventually it will get better. But this is their mindset. If you can't be on the continent 3, 4, 5 times a year, 6 times a year, 7 times a year, you're gonna lose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
You got to know those rules of engagement, as we will call it here in the West. You got to know those rules of engagement. When you get to know the rules of engagement, it makes your life easier. It's not that you're gonna lose something. Like I was saying, my driver will give me 5,000, they keep it 2. You got to know that it's going to happen, but you got to make them understand that, hey, I know what you're doing, and if you go overboard, it's not acceptable. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's the way Africa is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, all of that's good information, and it makes sense. And I hope everybody else is taking notes to this as well. I'm writing some stuff down as well. I think should be some deeper analysis as to how to get involved in some of this stuff, because I've heard from many people that we should be over there. I've talked to some people from Barbados who have said you'd be crazy not to go back to the island at this point with your skill set. So some things to think about.
Let me ask you this: like, is the skill set that you have? Could you do it remotely any place?
Yeah, for the most part, I've worked remote the last few years, and I can actually do it any place. But the only problem is if you're outside of the time zone, you're kind of screwed, right? Because if everybody else is up here, on the East Coast, you're probably sleep, or it's probably sleep time somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
It just has to make sure that it aligns correctly.
So let me say this: so if you go to Africa and you can earn remotely, let's say 75% or 80% of what you're getting in the States, and your money can follow you, you can be a guy. You can make so many things happen for yourself under that circumstance. Like, for example, I'm a YouTuber, and if I have decent internet, and if I have at least like 40 megabits per second, or up to 100, and it's getting better. I can do that. I can do everything that I'm doing right now in Kampala or wherever I'm at, and I can keep my lifestyle up, and then I can be on the ground, and I can make everything happen. Because when I was there last time, I made more things happen in like 2 weeks than I did. And like I said, every time you go to Africa, you learn something new. You get faster, you get more efficient. Because I'll tell you one thing about being on the continent. When you get on the continent, it's about being efficient, because here in America, the traffic is bad, but you can get Uber, you can get right there. A lot of times in the continent, depending on the congestion, you could lose 4 or 5 hours just in the traffic there. And this is common. Yeah. So maybe you might switch from not using the Uber to using the motorbike or a motorcycle. So everything is about being efficient and saving time. And eventually you gain that each time you go to the continent. That's number one. And you kind of start to live more like locals. But I will say that if you can make 75% or 80% of your money that you can make in America, and you can do it in Uganda, or you can do it in Kenya, or you can do it in South Africa, then you can, in 2-3 years, if you were there on the continent every day, meeting people, greeting people, building a network, then of course you're going to have a huge advantage over anybody in the world.
Mhm.
If a person, if I could take 80% of my salary right now, take a 20% cut just to be in Africa and be able to just to be there and make friends, for sure you're gonna blow it out the water. But if you're a person that has a full-time job and you want to go to Africa like once a year and do something, it's highly unlikely.
Let me see. Asiata and Muhammad in the chat says, "Do you brothers feel like they do this because some are in poverty, or are they deliberately trying to scam?" I don't know. I haven't been to the continent to really understand the mindset like that as to why they behave in that way that O'Shea is describing.
Well, let me say this: like, not everybody is a person that scams, right? I mean, I've had that. I mean, number one, here's the thing. You know, like the real estate agent that I dealt with, it wasn't necessarily a scam, but it was like 55, 60% of what he said he was going to do. And people do that because that's their business culture. This is what they do to each other. So, you know, people will treat you typically how they treat everybody else.
Mhm.
So you're a foreigner, so you have less protection, you know, under the law or whatever. So that's just how third world countries work. That's their mentality. But I will say this, that Africa, on the upside, there are a lot of smart people. There are some people who will be loyal and some people that you can do things with. Like, for example, the manager of Kinganda is getting ready to meet Phil in Kenya, like next week when he goes there from African Diaspora Network. And then she closed 2 other realtors for me today, just on shooting some houses and expanding our real estate luxury market. And she's doing that based off of what I taught her when I was there. So you do have people in Africa. The upside is you do have a lot of talented people, a lot of talented youth that come out of college that could really run a project for you. They can give you a spreadsheet. Like every day she gives me a spreadsheet. She gives me all that. I've never even taught her how to do this. She does this from school. So you have people that can do that on the continent. That is a plus. The talent is there, and people you have people who won't do it, but the problem is you have to find them. You understand?
Mhm.
And then that's the thing. And it takes time to find people that are actually productive for your organization, what you're trying to do. You know,
Mhm.
so because you need those. But I would just say that's a part of the business culture in Uganda. And the good thing about being African American is obviously we operate with more of a transparent business culture. We're not trying to beat people.
Right.
We're trying to, you know, do the right thing, and people do appreciate our culture and Americans over there. But just know that everybody's not going to appreciate that. People will take advantage of that
Mhm.
because you are Black, unfortunately. You're still a nigga to them, so you know, a lot of people are still going to be like, okay, well, you know, if you're a white person, maybe, but everybody gets screwed in Africa sometimes. But it's just what it is.
And here's the man that we should be talking to all night, Ghana Dan.
Ghana Dan, what's
Between him and
bro?
O'Shea know it all. You him, O'Shea,
He know more
I
than
can
me,
relax.
man. Man, Ghana Dan, that big bro, he been living out there. In fact, the first manager of my project, I got through Ghana Dan.
Yeah,
He
we
knew somebody
definitely.
in Uganda. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, we
You're
definitely
gonna
got
have
to
to
do
have
a
another
live
one of
stream.
these talks. You're gonna have to have one of these talks and set it up with Ghana Dan, O'Shea, and you know, even the guy from Ghana that O'Shea was talking about just now. If you can get him on, talk to him.
Yeah, I mean, that's just something that we have to really plan out, you know, a docket
Right.
for, and make sure we're covering all the bases and dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. Because I want to make sure that, you know, the information that goes out here is actually factual and not some, you know, pie in the sky sort of deal. I think a lot of I talked to some Haitian my Haitian neighbors, and they told me, you know, everybody's down in Haiti except for ADOS. You know, she didn't
Yep.
understand it.
Yeah, that's so true. That's very true. Like there's plenty of opportunities in Haiti. I mean, you have white Europeans and Asians opening businesses in Haiti, and then you hear all this, you know, political turmoil that's going on in Haiti. Well, they see some opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity down there. The same with Africa.
Yeah, she
Well,
brought
ask O'Shea who he see on the flights going to Africa. He's on it.
Oh yeah. You see
No
a few,
doubt.
you don't see none African Americans, I'll tell you that. It's usually whites and Chinese. And then
Mm.
the Africans that can afford to, you know, because people who fly in Africa, that's a privilege. It's a luxury. Anybody flies in America, But when you fly in Africa, I mean, you're somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Only the rich fly in Africa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I hate to end it right now, but we gotta end it because we're on the East Coast. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Because this was
No,
a great stream. Like I'm learning so much from O'Shea. Like he dropped a lot of heavy gems. Like
yeah, O'Shea stayed dropping jewels, man. He stayed dropping
yeah.
jewels. Thank you, O'Shea, for coming by, man. We definitely appreciate that. And
Another just one last thing.
Yep.
Just one thing that we can also do is like, whenever I go to Africa and I get contacts, I always share them with people. Like, for example, when Marcus Brown went to Kenya, I had somebody pick him up and take him around, stuff like that. Same thing in Uganda. So that's how we do things with these streams and build these online communities. As I get more information, I share that with people, or you get information, share that with me, and that's one of the ways that we can try to. We might not be able to stop people from getting taken advantage of, but if you ask me like, yo, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? Yes, I have this. This is who I do know that does this good. And that's how we can kind of start to do that. That might, but before somebody actually goes to a place, if we can start to do that, and that will help people get started on the right way. It'll decrease the time that you get screwed over. So that's something that we can start to do. And if anybody has questions, you can email me, connections, whatever I have, I'll give you my people.
Make sure you all are actually subscribe to Negro Manosphere as well, if you have not already done so. And make sure you hit the like button as well and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab. With that being said, peace and shalom.
Peace, brother.
Peace.
Hello, everybody.